Hi, everyone. Today, we're going to dive deep into the dark realities of medieval medicine and daily life through the story of a court physician. This is a grim, ironic, and brutally honest chronicle of survival. Each day for our protagonist is a series of illnesses, incurable wounds, groans, and endless attempts to heal those who have almost resigned themselves to the inevitable. But before you settle in, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I'm always curious to see who's joining us. Now get comfortable. We're about to begin. You are the court physician, not a doctor, not a healer, not a savior, just the only soul desperate enough to read ancient scrolls in a world where most can barely scrawl their own names. Your mornings do not begin with birdsong or gentle sunlight, but with the wet, hacking cough of the chamberlain next door, the soft skittering of rats beneath the straw, and the slow realization that you are still alive in a place designed by fate to kill you. You rise from your wooden bench, your so called bed, an invention so rudimentary and lumpy it feels designed for someone with fewer bones. You are greeted by the odor of centuries, sweat, mildew, smoke, chamber pots never quite emptied, stale beer, tallow candles burning down to their last stubs, the omnipresent tang of wet stone, and, somewhere under it all, the sour, metallic undertone of fear. Cold seeps through the walls in every season. In summer, it mingles with rot. In winter, it is a living thing that bites. You take your daily inventory before you stand. Limbs present, teeth accounted for, lice only moderately active, no new boils or buboes. A promising start. You check your stash, a handful of wilted herbs, some honey now half crystal and half mold, a suspicious bottle of elixir procured from a traveling friar who promised it would cure melancholy, leprosy, and death. You keep it for the truly hopeless cases. You have not bathed in weeks. Water is for the lord and the lady, and sometimes for their favored hounds. The last time you attempted to steal a bucket from the kitchen, you were nearly flogged. Cleanliness in the castle is less a virtue than a cause for suspicion. Dirt is a sign of humility. The cleaner you are, the more people wonder what you are trying to hide. Your day's first meal is bread so stale it must be softened with ale, and ale so murky it could be mistaken for ditch water. You try not to look at the small brown things crawling across the crust. Food is not about pleasure. It is a wager. Will the parasites in the bread or the ones already in your belly win today's contest for your innards? A young page appears, eyes still pink from a sleepless night, clutching his arm. There is a festering wound, courtesy of a kitchen knife that should have been cleaned last Michaelmas. You squint at the cut, ask the ritual questions, and tell him to hold it above his heart. You mutter something about humors, yellow bile, black bile, phlegm, blood. names you remember from the one precious medical manuscript left in the castle's musty library. You do not mention the actual cause of infection. Nobody here cares for causes, only cures. Breakfast is eaten standing because every bench and stool is taken by someone older, sicker, more desperate to rest. The grand hall is always crowded, squires snoring, soldiers grumbling, a servant girl mopping up last night's vomit with yesterday's rushes. The walls are hung with tapestries that once depicted chivalry, now thick with dust, grease, and stories best left untold. You hear distant shouts. Someone somewhere is already in pain. You check your pouch for your last leeches. The Lord favors bloodletting for nearly every malady, from melancholy to toothache. You suspect he likes the spectacle, the fainting, the relief that he is not the one losing blood today. You are always careful to keep the leeches fat and healthy. One died last week. You are not sure if it drowned in someone's blood or simply gave up. At sunrise, you shuffle out into the main corridor, hunched beneath the weight of expectations. A maid stops you with a whispered plea. The mistress's feet are swollen again. Another servant asks about a boil hidden somewhere that must not be named. You are grateful for your reputation. It means nobody ever asks you to dance, to sing, to be entertaining. You are a harbinger of bad news, a necessary evil. The castle is a maze of narrow, smoky passageways, floors slick with spilled beer and mud, all echoing with snatches of argument in half a dozen tongues. You pass by the kitchens, where the cook eyes you with the suspicion reserved for men who know which sausages are stuffed with rat. In the stables, you see the corpse of a mule that died in the night, eyes already plucked by crows. You pause to consider whether anything from its carcass can be boiled into a salve for the Lord's gout. You decide against it for now. Every door you open reveals someone in need, a girl with a rash, a knight with a festering toe, a priest who claims his soul is unwell but whose breath smells strongly of last year's wine. You offer advice that is half prayer, half guesswork. Sometimes you wonder how much good you truly do. Sometimes you remember a patient who survived and feel a flicker of pride, quickly extinguished when you realize they survived in spite of your treatments, not because of them. The day has only just begun, and already you are weary. You wish for an hour's peace, a clean cup, a fire that does not smoke, a place where the walls do not weep with damp. These are not wishes you share aloud. You do not hope for miracles. Here, survival is enough. You are not summoned with a trumpet, nor with a polite knock at your drafty chamber door. It is the scullery maid, wheezing and red-eyed, who finds you first, thrusting a folded note into your hand as if it were a death sentence. You break the wax seal with a fingernail that could use a good cleaning if only you had water and time. The note is brief. The Lord is suffering again. Come at once. There is no signature. The words are just clear enough that you recognize the shaky scrawl of the lady in waiting, who writes for the Lord because his hands are too swollen for any such labor. You gather your tools, a dull knife, some waxed thread, a few leeches that may or may not still be alive, your dwindling supply of willow bark, a rag, and the elixir you have already decided not to use until things are truly desperate. These you place in a rough cloth bag that smells of every tincture, herb, and bodily fluid you have ever known. With a sigh, you make your way to the Lord's private chamber, which is warmer and less draughty than your own, but, you note, no less fetid. The Lord is in his grand bed, which groans beneath his weight. He is red faced and sweating, his legs thrust out from under moth eaten blankets. His left foot is swollen, mottled purple, and twice the size it should be. He greets you with a groan and a curse, half in Latin, half in a dialect you never quite mastered. His breath is thick with the scent of spoiled wine, last night's roast, and something sourer, fear. You kneel at the edge of the bed, a position you know is expected, but your knees protest. You ask the same questions you ask every morning. Where does it hurt? Has the pain worsened? Did you eat anything unusual? The answers are always the same. It hurts everywhere. Yes, of course it is worse, you fool. No, I ate what you prescribed and nothing more. But you know what he ate. You know it came from the kitchens, where meat is rarely fresh and the wine is often watered. You know, too, that nothing you can do will cure him. You are here to ease his suffering, or at least his fear, until the next attack. You touch the swollen joint. He hisses and flinches, blaming you for his agony. His wife, the lady of the castle, sits nearby, her face a mask of practiced concern. She offers you a tight-lipped smile and a cup of thin beer. You accept it, though it does little for your thirst. She asks in a low voice if you think her husband will live through the season. You do not answer honestly. Nobody in your position ever does. The Lord demands bloodletting. He believes, as all noblemen do, that sickness is a matter of bad blood, poisoned humors, and imbalance that can be drained. You fetch your knife and your bowl, hands steady, heart pounding. Each time you do this, you wonder if this is the time he will bleed too much, if the color of his blood will reveal some secret to you, something more than just the obvious, that he is dying by inches. You open a vein. The blood is thick, slow, reluctant. He complains it is not enough. You promise to bring stronger leeches next time, though you know they are nearly extinct in these lands, caught and sold to every desperate healer and charlatan within a day's ride. When the bowl is half full, you bind his arm and wrap his foot in a paste of mud, willow, and nettle, which he hates and swears against, but which gives you a sense of having done something, at least. He dismisses you with a wave. Next time, bring real medicine, he growls, as if there is such a thing. You bow, backing away as custom demands. The lady thanks you quietly, her eyes scanning your face for a flicker of hope. You give her the look you have practiced, serene, competent, only slightly weary. She says nothing more, and you are free to leave. Outside the chamber, you find yourself shaking. You wipe your hands on your cloak, though blood seeps through anyway. You walk the length of the corridor, passing servants who avert their eyes. They know what you know. One day, the Lord's pain will end, and it will not be because of your skill or your potions or your prayers. It will end because everybody fails, even those who believe themselves chosen by God. Still, your duty is not done. There are others waiting, some with boils, some with fevers, some with wounds that will not heal. But the memory of the Lord's swollen foot follows you, a reminder of the limits of your art, the futility of hope, and the certainty that tomorrow you will be summoned again. In the hallway, you catch a glimpse of your own reflection in a tarnished shield, hollow eyes, blood under your fingernails, and a stoop to your shoulders that was not there when you arrived at the castle years ago. You cannot remember when you stopped believing in cures. The day moves on, but its shape never changes. The great hall is awake now. Flickering tallow candles illuminate faces smeared with sleep and, in some cases, last night's stew. You shuffle into the hall with the slow, stiff gait of a man who has not had a real rest in years, which is not far from the truth. The assembled company is a gallery of privilege and disease, squires with boils, a chaplain with eyes rimmed red from constant weeping, the lady's maid scratching at lice in her hair, and, at the high table, those you serve, though never quite as an equal, a heavy, acrid haze floats through the air, burnt fat, old smoke, and the faint, underlying stench of sour milk. The long tables are already crowded. Servants scurry back and forth, arms full of bread, pitchers of beer, the odd slab of dried meat. No one seems particularly glad to be here. The courtiers nurse hangovers with the same weary resignation as you face the morning. Your breakfast is the same as always. Two slices of bread so hard you could patch a hole in the roof with them, a smear of something that aspires to be butter, and a cup of ale that tastes faintly of vinegar. There are weevils in the bread, of course. You do not bother to remove them. Protein is protein. You chew with slow determination, watching as the others tear at their own portions, sometimes using teeth, sometimes only their hands. Manners are for the healthy and the rich. Here, everyone is either too tired or too hungry to pretend. The Lord and his lady do not join you. They take their breakfast behind closed doors, protected from the draft, the noise, and the common gaze. You do not blame them. If you could avoid the hall, you would. But your place, as always, is neither at the high table nor among the servants. You exist in that uneasy in between, a necessary presence no one quite trusts. The conversation is as lively as one expects from a crowd of the nearly dead. Someone discusses the market in town, which is said to be infested with thieves and rats. Another complains about the taste of last night's rabbit, swearing it was not rabbit at all, but something less palatable, perhaps cat. A night tells a story about a distant cousin who died in his sleep, and everyone nods, secretly jealous. To die in one's sleep is considered a great blessing, especially here, where most go noisily and in pieces. You eat in silence, saving your voice for more important moments. Occasionally, a servant will whisper your name, seeking a private word about a rash, a cough, a lingering pain that refuses to leave. You offer what advice you can: boiled nettle tea, cold compresses, prayers whispered over dirty water. Sometimes you think you are more priest than physician. Sometimes you think the priests are better at this, since at least they promise salvation. At the next table, a squire retches into his cup. No one moves to help him. A moment later, he wipes his mouth and resumes eating. Across from you, a young maid picks at a scab on her forearm until it bleeds, then licks the blood away, staring into the distance. The food is not poisoned, at least not in the dramatic sense. It is simply what happens to food when there are too many mouths and not enough time for care. Yet, everyone knows that poison is never far away. The cook, a surly man with an arm scarred from a childhood accident, has been accused more than once of putting bad things in the Lord's meals. The truth is that most poisonings here are accidental: spoiled meat, moldy bread, sour ale left too long in the cask. Still, every sudden illness is treated with suspicion. You have seen men beaten half to death because they served soup that smelled off. You have stitched their wounds yourself. Today, there is talk of a rat found dead in the pantry. The chaplain says it is an omen, though he cannot decide if it is good or bad. You say nothing, but your mind turns to the Lord's aching feet and the constant worry about poison. If the Lord dies, you will be called upon to explain why. You do not relish the thought. Last winter, the cook's assistant disappeared after a bad batch of sausage felled half the castle. His body was never found, but his screams were heard through the kitchen walls. You finish your meal quickly. Hunger, like hope, is best dealt with fast and with little thought. You wipe your hands on your tunic, though they are no cleaner than before. The day's work waits, and already you feel the first tremors of unease, a sense that something, somewhere, is festering. A page appears at your elbow, whispering that the master of the stables is in pain again. You nod, gathering your things, and rise from the bench. Another day, another round of suffering. The court moves on without you, their laughter echoing like distant thunder. You are a ghost among the living, visible only when needed, never quite of this world. You slip from the hall, heart heavy and head full of half-remembered remedies. As you leave, you pause at the door and glance back. The bread is already gone. The ale is nearly finished. Someone is crying quietly into their hands, but no one seems to notice. You sigh, stepping out into the corridor where the air is only marginally fresher. Outside, the world is waking. The bells toll for the morning prayer, and the sound drifts over the roofs, mingling with the cries of hawkers in the distant market. You close your eyes for a moment, wishing for silence, for peace, for a place where the bread is soft and the poison is only a story. But you know better. Here, every day is the same, and still you go on. The kitchen is the heart of the castle, and as with most hearts, it is warm, throbbing, and above all, perpetually under siege. You descend the winding stairs from the great hall, clutching your battered satchel, bracing yourself for the assault of smells and sounds awaiting you below. The further you descend, the thicker the air becomes, fat, smoke, and the faint, lingering tang of something burned beyond recognition. It is morning, which means the kitchen is already in chaos. The head cook, a woman whose age and temper are equally indeterminate, is shouting at a red faced boy for dropping a bucket of milk. Milk is precious, a treasure more valuable than silver. Now it is pooling on the uneven flagstones. A dozen stray cats and a pair of fat rats fighting over the spill. No one tries to stop them. Here, the battle between pest and provision is constant, and victory is always temporary. You are greeted by a chorus of groans and mutters. The staff view you with suspicion, a necessary evil, like taxes or plague. Most have their own theories about illness, cures, and the fine art of survival. They know that a rat tail boiled in ale can stop a cough. It cannot. That eating garlic keeps away both demons and creditors. It does not. And that you, with your book learning, are not to be entirely trusted. You try to keep your visits brief. The less you see, the less you know, and the safer you are when questions are asked. Today, however, the cook has summoned you herself. She is cradling one hand in the other, her face set in grim determination. She thrusts her palm under your nose. A jagged cut runs across it, already swollen and red, bits of dirt and onion skin wedged inside. Another one, she grunts. What will you do for it then? You inspect the wound. You tell her to wash it, knowing there is no clean water to spare, and even if there were, she would use it for soup. Instead, you reach for your pouch and pull out a wad of old linen, a salve made from honey and herbs, and a needle blackened from years of use. She does not flinch as you clean and bind the cut. Pain is a language spoken fluently here. Will I lose the hand? She asks, almost curious. Not today, you reply, but you both know the truth. Infection is as common as hunger, and the luck of the draw is rarely kind. She nods, accepting this with the resignation of one who has watched too many hands, feet, and lives lost to smaller wounds than this. You ask if she has seen more rats than usual, if the bread is sour, if anyone has complained of stomach pains after eating. She narrows her eyes, a glint of humor breaking through. Always more rats, always sour bread, always stomach pains. What of it? You almost smile. If anyone dies, tell them it was the air, or the water, or too much salt. She laughs, a rough bark, then returns to berating her staff. You step out of the way as a boy rushes past with a sack of turnips, chased by a dog. You notice a cockroach the size of a thumb darting across the table, disappearing into a sack of flour. You wonder, as you often do, how much of the castle's population is truly human. You turn your attention to the cauldrons simmering over the fire. The cook is proud of her broth, though you suspect it would kill a less experienced stomach. You prod a suspicious lump with a wooden spoon. What is it? You ask. She shrugs. Whatever was left from last night. There is a philosophy in that, you suppose. You take a moment to scan the faces of the kitchen staff, sunken eyes, chapped lips, hands rough and scarred. You ask if anyone else is unwell. One girl lifts her sleeve to reveal a rash spreading up her arm. Another boy has a swollen jaw, the unmistakable sign of a bad tooth. There is little you can do for either. You prescribe rest, honey for the rash, if any can be spared, and a warm compress for the tooth, knowing full well these are comforts, not cures. Your eye catches a barrel of apples, half of them soft and brown. You mention to the cook that she might sort them before someone eats one rotten. She rolls her eyes. They will eat what I give them and be glad of it. You cannot argue. The only alternative is hunger. As you prepare to leave, a sudden commotion at the door draws your attention. A rat, fat and sleek from months of feasting, darts between your legs and into the pantry. A kitchen boy chases it with a broom, swearing under his breath. The cook shakes her head. It is a sign, she mutters. A sign of what? You ask, more out of habit than curiosity. She wipes her hands on her apron. A sign we will all live another day if the rats do not eat us first. There is wisdom in that, you think. In this castle, survival is always a question of who eats whom. You leave the kitchen behind, stepping back into the corridor, your hands still sticky with honey, and the knowledge that, for now, the only medicine you can offer is patience and prayer. The day stretches ahead, heavy and unchanging. You have many patients left to see, and the sun is barely above the trees. You do not remember exactly when you became the blacksmith's regular physician. Perhaps it was the time you stitched his thigh after an argument with an axe, or perhaps it was simply because, in this place, everyone sooner or later comes to you, willingly or otherwise. The blacksmith's forge lies on the far side of the courtyard, the air around it perpetually thick with the smell of hot iron, scorched leather, and singed hair. It is a place of ceaseless violence, metal against metal, flesh against fate. You are summoned by a breathless apprentice, his face gray with soot and anxiety. Master says, "Come quick," he stammers, wringing his hands. It's his arm again. You do not hurry. Nothing good ever comes from hurrying, but your pace is steady. You know the way by heart. Past the stables where horses stamp and snort, past the well where a bucket has been left overturned, past a heap of broken wagon wheels, casualties of the blacksmith's other trade. The forge is a world apart. Inside, heat reigns supreme. The blacksmith is waiting, his massive frame slumped on a stool. His shirt is off, revealing skin mottled by old scars, fresh burns, and the angry redness of his latest wound. It covers most of his forearm, a weeping blister, yellow at the edges, oozing pus with each movement. You wince, but not outwardly. A physician's face must be as neutral as a prayer. He grunts in greeting, holding out the arm like an offering to a merciless god. It's not healing, he growls. Hurts worse than before. Can't grip the hammer. You look closely. The burn is deep, the flesh swollen and glossy. Around the wound, flies hover, feasting with an enthusiasm you can only envy. You ask the questions you always ask. When did it happen? 3 days past, I think. Did you wash it? With ale, best I had. Did you pick at it? I tried to drain it, did not help. You nod. It never does. There is, of course, no anesthesia. Pain is part of life, as familiar and expected as hunger. You warn him, as you always do, that what must be done will not be pleasant. He laughs, a sound like gravel in a barrel. Just do it, doctor. I've got horseshoes to finish, and a wife who is sick of my complaining. You clean your hands as best you can, rubbing them with vinegar from your pouch. You prepare your tools, a small knife, fire for sterilizing, strips of old linen. You tell the apprentice to hold the smith's other arm. The boy looks green but nods. You meet the blacksmith's eyes for a moment. In them, you see a trust that is more resignation than hope. You slice the blister, watching yellow pus and watery blood spill out, the stench sharp and unmistakable. The smith bites down on a leather strap, his face white with effort. You press the wound with linen, squeeze out what you can, and pour a burning liquor over it. The skin hisses, and so does the blacksmith, but he does not cry out. You dust the wound with powdered dried sage, a habit you picked up from an old monk who swore it kept spirits at bay, though you know it does nothing for infection. When it is over, the blacksmith looks down at his arm and sighs. Will it heal? You shrug. Honesty is a rare courtesy. If you are lucky, and if you do not use it too soon. He grins despite himself, flexing his fingers. Then I will not be lucky. You bind the arm with a strip of relatively clean linen. You give instructions. Keep it dry. Do not pick at the scab. Come back if it swells again. He thanks you with a nod, the closest thing to affection you are likely to receive today. The apprentice slips you a small loaf of bread as payment, better than nothing. You step out of the forge into the dull gray of the courtyard. The air outside seems thin, and cold after the furnace inside. You rub your hands together, sticky with sweat and blood, and make a mental note to check on the smith in a few days. If he is still alive, if you are still here. This is what passes for healing. The hope that your interventions will do less harm than the wounds themselves. You think of the blacksmith's wife, who will likely scold him for not being careful, and the apprentices who will whisper that the doctor is either a miracle worker or a jinx, depending on how the arm fares. On your way back to the castle, you pass the pile of wagon wheels again. You pause briefly to watch a group of children kicking a skull around the yard, their laughter echoing off the stone. You wonder if they know it once belonged to a stable hand who died of fever last winter, or if they care. Back in the castle corridor, you are greeted by the musty aroma of old rushes, spilled beer, and despair. You wipe your hands on your tunic, gaze out at the sky, and realize that the day is only halfway done. There are many more wounds to see, more pain to witness, and little in the way of comfort to offer. Still, you move on. The castle, like its people, does not wait for the weak or the tired. Tomorrow, the blacksmith may be dead, or healed, or missing an arm. You have done all you can. It is not enough, but it never is. Your work rarely pauses, but today you are given an unusual interruption, an opportunity, at least in theory, to improve the castle's odds of surviving its own squalor. In the midst of binding wounds and muttering half believed prayers, a boy from the stables thrusts a grubby letter into your hands, his fingers sticky with some unidentifiable grease. From the brothers at St. Edric's, he says, then flees before you can ask if he has washed in the last week. St. Edric's Monastery sits beyond the marshes, a day's ride if the weather is kind and your horse does not founder in the mud. It is a place both feared and respected, where the monks grow herbs, copy old books, and occasionally send out news, warnings, or, in your luckiest moments, new recipes for poultices that might do more good than harm. You wipe your hands on your tunic and break the seal, squinting at the careful crabbed script. The letter is long-winded, as always. The abbot begins with pleasantries, hoping that the Lord's gout is less fierce, that the cook has not been poisoned again, that the rats have not overrun the larder. He goes on at length about the weather, dreadful, the turnip harvest, meager, and the price of lamp oil, scandalous. Only then does he come to the point. The monks have obtained a new treatise, copied from a traveler from distant Salerno. In it are described marvelous cures: opium for pain, vinegar for wounds, new ways to set broken bones. Your hands tremble slightly as you read. Opium, you think, would be a blessing. If only you had access to such wonders. Instead, your medicine chest consists of whatever you can dig from the castle's overgrown garden, whatever is not eaten by rabbits or trampled by children. Vinegar is a luxury reserved for the Lord's table, and your attempts at splinting bones are limited by the quality of firewood and the patience of your patience. The letter continues, offering to send a copy of the new treatise if you can provide the monastery with certain items in return: beeswax, honey, a barrel of the Lord's strongest ale, and, if possible, a pair of sturdy boots for the youngest scribe. You sigh. The monk's requests are always a negotiation, and you have little to bargain with. Still, the promise of knowledge is enough to rouse you from your weariness. You make a note to visit the steward later, to plead your case and see if anything can be spared. For now, you answer the letter, your Latin serviceable but never elegant. You write of your recent cases, the blacksmith's burn, the cook's infected hand, the Lord's ever worsening gout. You ask for clarification on the use of opium, for more detail on the vinegars. You mention, somewhat obliquely, your need for prayers, though you are never quite sure if the monk's prayers do more good than their ointments. You seal the letter and send it with the stable boy, along with instructions not to dawdle in the marshes or accept gifts from the wandering hermit who lives in a hollowed oak and claims to heal the blind. You know the boy will do as he pleases, but you try anyway. For the rest of the day, the promise of new knowledge hangs over you like a fragile lantern in the gloom. You find yourself eyeing your meager stores with new hope and new despair. What good is a cure described in a distant script if you have neither the tools nor the ingredients? How many secrets are lost each year, carried away by hungry rats or careless scribes, or simply never reaching your hands at all? As evening falls, you make a slow round of the castle's sick. You see a child feverish and delirious, a maid who cannot stop coughing, a guard with a festering bite on his leg. For each you offer the same: herbs, honey if you have it, whispered reassurances. In the back of your mind, you imagine what you could do if you had opium, if you had clean linen, if you had even a tenth of what the great physicians of the South possess. You remember the first time you read a medical manuscript years ago, squinting in the candlelight of a freezing cell. The words were magic, cure, relief, remedy. You believed then that knowledge was a weapon against death. Now you know it is more often a shield made of parchment, better than nothing, but full of holes. As you lie down that night, the cold seeping into your bones, you wonder if the monk's letter will bring any real change, or will it be, like so much else in your life, a promise half kept, an improvement measured not in lives saved, but in days borrowed. Still, you cannot help but hope. Tomorrow, perhaps, a new cure will arrive. Or perhaps it will rain, the road will flood, and the boy will return empty handed. Either way, you will wake, tend the sick, and wait for the next letter. Here, in the slow, grinding machinery of survival, hope is just another ingredient, scarce, unreliable, but never wholly absent. It is a truth universally known in your castle that no ailment, great or small, can be addressed without first considering the benefits of bleeding. It does not matter if the patient suffers from a swollen toe, a feverish brow, or simply a bad night's sleep. Bloodletting is both cure and ritual, a performance that reassures the desperate and the ignorant alike. You are not sure when the castle first acquired its taste for leeches, but now, like lice and hopelessness, they are everywhere. Your own relationship with leeches is complex. In theory, you are their master. In practice, you are more their servant. You keep your stock of leeches in a battered jar, tucked away in a dark, damp corner of your chamber, along with other essentials: dried lavender, a handful of pins, scraps of linen, and whatever passes for a surgical blade in these parts. You have learned painfully that leeches must be respected. Too much heat, and they die. Too much cold, and they escape, leaving behind only a slick trail and the sickening realization that you will spend the next week listening for their soft, wet bodies somewhere in your bedclothes. The first patient of the day is the steward, whose complexion is sallow, whose eyes are sunken, and whose patience is thin. He claims to suffer from headaches, dizziness, and a deep, nameless melancholy, a diagnosis so common you could prescribe it in your sleep. He has heard, as everyone has, that bloodletting will rebalance his humors. You do not argue. To do so would be pointless and perhaps even dangerous. The steward is not a man to be made a fool of, especially not by someone who handles his blood. You fetch the leeches, holding them up for inspection. The steward's lips curl in distaste, but he rolls up his sleeve without further protest. You place two of the fattest leeches on the inside of his elbow, murmuring half remembered words from an old treatise to lend an air of authority. The leeches latch on, and within moments, the steward's blood is trickling down his arm and pooling in a chipped bowl beneath his chair. You keep a close eye on the proceedings. It is important not to let the leeches take too much. They are greedy, and so is death. The steward's face slackens as the blood drains. He seems to enter a trance, a state halfway between pain and relief. You count the moments in your head, not trusting the sun's position or the vague sense of time that rules the castle. When it is over, you remove the leeches, plump and glistening, and drop them into a separate jar to recover. You bind the steward's arm with linen, offer him a weak beer, and wait for him to regain his composure. He nods, thanks you in a voice that sounds even weaker than before, and staggers away, already telling himself that the cure is working. You are left with the blood, the bowl, and the uncomfortable awareness that you have done nothing useful. This is the secret you cannot share, not with the steward, not with anyone. You have read enough to suspect that bloodletting is mostly superstition, a comfort for those who need to see their suffering made visible. But you keep this knowledge to yourself because knowledge is dangerous and hope is a fragile thing. Your next patient is a child, thin as a reed, with eyes too big for her face and a cough that rattles in her chest. Her mother insists on bloodletting. She has heard that it draws out the sickness. You try to explain, gently, that the child is too weak, that she needs rest and warm broth, not leeches. The mother insists. You compromise. A single small leech, watched closely, and a promise of honeyed milk if the cough worsens. The rest of the day follows the same pattern: blood and leeches for the tired and the anxious, poultices and prayers for the hopeless. You wash your hands in cold water when you can find it, but more often you settle for wiping them on your tunic and hoping for the best. In the quiet moments between patients, you tend to your leeches, cleaning their jar, checking for the dead, separating the fat from the hungry. You wonder what would happen if you ran out, if someday there were no more leeches left to harvest blood and belief from the castle's veins. Would the people invent some new ritual, or would they simply let themselves die? Evening comes, and with it, a rare moment of reflection. You sit by your window, watching the last light fade from the sky, your hands still stained and your mind churning with doubts. You remember a time when you believed in miracles, when every new cure felt like a triumph. Now, miracles are something you wait for, not something you expect. Most days, you doubt they ever existed at all. Still, tomorrow, you will reach for the leeches again. You will play your part in the old drama, offering pain as a cure, blood as an answer, hope as a distant echo. Here, in the castle's relentless rhythm, the performance never ends. It is early morning, the kind of pale, gray beginning that promises nothing but another round of ordinary misery. Before the castle fully stirs, you slip out to the garden. It is not a garden as the nobility of the South would know. No terraces, no fountains, no sweet air thick with roses. Here, it is a patchwork of mud, nettle, burdock, and bramble, fenced more to keep out the chickens than the thieves. In truth, the chickens seem the more persistent. You kneel beside the herb bed, picking your way through dew-soaked weeds and the inevitable droppings. The ground is hard and reluctant. Most of your medicinal plants are stubborn, half-wild things that thrive on neglect. Feverfew for headaches, sage for the infected, a stand of garlic whose leaves are as chewed as the local gossip. You search for dandelion root, dig up a handful of stinging nettle, and slice some willow bark with a knife so blunt it feels symbolic. There is no magic in these plants, no guaranteed salvation. You know their limits as well as their virtues. Still, you rely on them for nearly everything: soothing fevers, reducing swelling, sometimes just giving the hopeless a taste of bitterness so they believe they are being cured. The line between medicine and faith is always thin, sometimes invisible. The cook joins you, muttering about thieving birds and children with more hunger than sense. She wants more nettle for the stew. You tell her nettle will not cure the Lord's gout, but she shrugs, unconcerned. She knows, as you do, that when true remedies fail, at least the belly can be filled. She asks for rosemary, which you have not seen in weeks, and you offer her yarrow instead. It tastes like regret, she says, but takes it anyway. Returning to your small chamber, you lay your harvest out on the table. The air is heavy with the scent of crushed leaves, mud, and hope gone stale. You begin the ritual of making medicines. You pound the nettle into a paste with honey, if there is any left. You soak the willow bark in water for a week infusion. You chop the dandelion root and hang it to dry, half for poultices, half for tea. Today you are summoned by a maid with a rash that creeps up her neck. You dab nettle juice on the angry skin, instruct her to avoid scratching, and prescribe a tea of sage and garlic. She scowls at the taste but thanks you anyway. The next patient is a guard with aching joints and a fear in his eyes. He has heard talk of the plague in a distant town, and every cough now seems like a death sentence. You give him garlic and promise to visit tomorrow. You do not tell him the truth that if plague comes, garlic will be as useful as prayer. Sometimes, on the worst days, you wonder about the old woman who lives beyond the village, the one that everyone calls a witch. You have seen her in the market, trading bundles of dried weeds for copper coins and odd favors. She is said to know cures you do not, secrets whispered in the dark by the old gods. The villagers both fear and depend on her. Once, in desperation, you sent a child to fetch her witch's brew for a boy dying of fever. The brew stank of mold and bitter roots, but the boy lived, at least longer than you expected. You are not sure if it was medicine or miracle, luck or chance. In the end, it does not matter. People will take what comfort they can, and sometimes comfort is all you can give. Evening falls, and you sit by the window, mixing the last of your nettle with a little vinegar, preparing for tomorrow's pains. The castle is quieter now. The rush of day turned to the slow hush of night. Somewhere a dog howls, and you hear the distant sound of laughter from the kitchens, a reminder that life, however tenuous, goes on. Before you sleep, you make your rounds one last time. The Lord is dozing, his feet wrapped in your latest poultice, his face grim even in sleep. The maid's rash is no better, but no worse. The guard's cough is softer, though his fear is not. You leave them all with a last quiet word, a promise of more remedies, more nettle, more hope. In the dark, you wonder, are you a healer or only another part of the slow machinery of suffering? The answer, you think, lies somewhere in the garden, in the stubborn nettle that returns every spring, no matter how often it is uprooted. As the days in the castle bleed into each other, one indistinguishable from the next, you develop habits not so much to remember life, but to keep track of death. You have, tucked in the back of your chest, a ledger. It is not fine parchment, but a handful of rough, dog eared pages, held together by a loop of twine and a persistent superstition that the act of recording each death will somehow slow the process, or at least make sense of it. You open the ledger every evening, once the last fire has been banked, and the halls grow silent, except for the muffled snores and the distant creak of timbers settling for the night. You sit at your narrow table by the flicker of a tallow candle that weeps more than it burns, and you begin to write. The entries are never elaborate. There is no poetry in these deaths, only brief notations, and sometimes a guess. Old Marjorie, fever. Tom, stable hand, crushed by cart. Giles, kitchen boy, boils turned black. There is a pattern, but it is the pattern of a hammer falling, again and again, on the same helpless nail. Tonight, you add three more names. The first is a child, barely weaned, who wasted away despite your strongest bruise. The mother wept without sound, holding the tiny body as if her grief might warm it back to life. The second is a guard, dead by morning after a week of shivering. You suspect pneumonia, but the word means little here. There are only lungs that stop working, breath that will not come, and blood that grows cold. The last is the old dog who slept by the kitchen fire. You do not usually record animals, but this one outlasted three stewards, and his passing is as keenly felt as any human's. Sometimes, when you write, you find your own hand shaking, not with sorrow, but with fatigue. How many times have you copied the same cause? Fever, flux, accident, rot. Sometimes you wonder if your own name will one day be added by a less weary hand with a note. Physician, cause unknown, died quietly, as most do not. You try to recall the faces of the dead, but they blur in your memory, replaced by others, still living, still suffering, still demanding that you do something, anything, to stop the inevitable. The truth, of course, is that you cannot. Your tools are too few, your cures too weak, and death is always more diligent than you. On some evenings, the entries in your ledger spark gossip. Was that really an accident in the stables, or did someone help the cart along? Did old Marjorie's fever come from her own neglect, or from the bread the cook declared still good enough? Once, when a visiting merchant died after supper, the castle nearly tore itself apart looking for a poisoner. The kitchen staff were beaten, the cook's apprentice vanished, and you spent hours swearing on every holy relic that you saw no signs of foul play, though you knew the truth was simply a bad fish, caught too late and cooked too little. You try to keep your ledger out of sight. Not everyone approves of your habit. The chaplain once accused you of witchcraft, of attempting to divine the future by tallying the dead. What does it matter? He hissed. How many die, or from what? All will meet their maker in the end. You did not argue, but you kept your ledger. You suspect that the numbers do matter, even if only to you. Some nights, after a particularly heavy day, you do not write at all. The burden of so many names, so many small, extinguished lives, is more than you can carry. You lie awake, staring at the rafters, counting heartbeats instead of deaths. In the morning, you always catch up, ashamed of your lapse but unable to do otherwise. Tonight, As you close your ledger, you wonder if somewhere, far away, a true physician, a learned man with shelves of books and jars of rare powders, keeps a record like yours. Or is it only here, in the margins of the world, that such grim bookkeeping seems necessary? You snuff out the candle, wrap the ledger in a scrap of cloth, and tuck it away beneath your blanket. The dark settles around you like a second skin. Tomorrow there will be more names to add, more causes to guess, more grief to swallow, and so the list grows, line by line, a monument to the limits of your art and to the relentless, anonymous machinery of death. Morning in the castle never truly feels like a new beginning. The day starts not with a sense of renewal, but with a cautious inventory of what and who is left, of which faces have grown even paler, of which coughs are sharper, and of which scowls might herald new trouble. For you, as court physician, the greatest daily trial is not the wounds or the fevers, but the meetings with those who hold power, the council. The council sits in a drafty chamber with thick stone walls that do little to muffle voices or retain warmth. Today's session begins with the Lord himself, propped up on cushions, his swollen foot elevated on a stool, face flushed from both pain and pride. Beside him sits the lady, hands folded, eyes sharp. Arrayed around the table are the steward, the captain of the guard, the chaplain, and sometimes the scribe who attempts to record the proceedings, but often gives up in despair. You take your assigned seat, never too close to the head of the table, never too far from the door. The business of the council is not so much to rule as to survive another week, another outbreak, another rumor of war or famine or pestilence. Today, the subject is health, not your own, but your Lord's, which by the strange alchemy of feudal logic is equated with the health of the realm. If the Lord is well, then God is smiling. If the Lord is not, then someone must be at fault. Invariably, that someone is you. You listen as the council debates. The steward blames the kitchen, the captain of the guard blames the weather, the chaplain blames sin. The lady wants to know why the Lord's gout is worse this winter. The Lord himself interrupts every few minutes to grumble about sleepless nights and unending pain. You are expected to offer both explanations and reassurances, but never to sound uncertain. You list your remedies: herbal poultices, bloodletting, willow bark for the pain, strict avoidance of salted meats, which is ignored. You avoid mentioning that nothing has truly worked. Instead, you use the language of hope and probability, words like improvement, relief, stabilize. You assure them the Lord's constitution is strong, that setbacks are to be expected, that recovery is a process. The scribe tries to keep up, scratching away with his quill, missing half of what is said as his ink runs out. The council wants answers, but more than that, it wants someone to blame. Every cough, every sleepless night, every sign of decline is a threat to their own fragile positions. If the Lord grows worse, it is because you have failed. If he dies, it will not be of natural causes, but of your negligence, your incompetence, your secret malice. You are not just a healer, but a shield, one that can be sacrificed if it breaks. Today, the discussion turns to more drastic measures. The chaplain suggests more prayer and penance. The lady proposes importing a new physician, someone with a reputation from the city. The captain of the guard offers to find the witch in the village and bring her for questioning. The steward complains that the castle cannot spare any more honey, that the cost of medicines is too high. You feel the weight of their eyes on you. Every suggestion is a threat in disguise, every question a test. You know the stories of healers hanged for failing their lords, of physicians blamed for poisonings, of wise men run out of town for being too clever or not clever enough. Your only defense is humility and caution. You nod, you agree, you defer to their wisdom. The Lord asks you directly if he will live to see the summer. The room holds its breath. You give the only answer you can. If God wills it, my Lord, and if your lordship follows my advice. He grunts, half satisfied, and gestures for more beer. The meeting drags on. They debate the purchase of spices and the merits of new bloodletting. The scribe spills ink on the table, and the chaplain launches into a story about a saint who healed a king with nothing but prayer and a feather. The lady, perhaps sensing your anxiety, asks quietly if there is anything you truly need. You dare to ask for more linen and a fresh batch of willow bark, knowing that, at best, you might receive half. When the council finally adjourns, you are dismissed with a wave and a warning to do better. You leave the chamber with your heart thudding, the cold sweat of fear clinging to your neck. You know that nothing is secure, not your position, not your life, not the body of the man you serve. Your fate hangs on the whims of pain and the politics of hope. In the corridor, a servant passes with a tray of bread and a pitcher of wine. You consider, not for the first time, that poison could end all your troubles, or, just as likely, begin new ones. You force the thought away. There is work to be done, patience to see, and always blame to be avoided. Your greatest skill, you realize, it is not healing. It is surviving, unseen, unblamed in the shadow of someone else's suffering. You may have imagined, at some point in your earlier years, that the title of court physician would grant you a life of some comfort, perhaps a bed free of fleas, a cup of clear water, a household with servants to scrub away the constant dirt and grief. You would have been wrong, and not for the last time. As it stands, your private life is private only in the sense that no one else wants it. You share a small, drafty chamber at the edge of the castle's servant quarters with your wife and, when they are not dead or dying, your children. The room is little more than a square of stone, its single window half choked by ivy and mud, its floor a patchwork of rushes and rags that must be changed as often as your energy allows, which is to say, rarely. At night, the air is thick with smoke from the hearth below, and in winter, you sometimes wake with a dusting of frost on your blanket. Your wife, once as lively as a lark, now moves slowly, carefully, each step calculated to avoid pain. She lost most of her teeth years ago, first to fever, then to the slow decay that no honey, herb, or prayer could halt. Eating is a trial. She gums her bread and stews, and you grind whatever you can for her. But meat is a luxury beyond both your skill and the kitchen's generosity. Her face is thinner now, the lines etched deep, and when she smiles, it is with the weary humor of someone who knows the punchline to every cruel joke life has to offer. You have had 3 children. The oldest died before her 3rd year, one endless night of fever and shivering. The second, a boy, lasted long enough to learn to speak and then to cough himself into silence during a winter that seemed never to end. The third, your last, though not by choice, is a daughter, thin and sharp eyed, with a cough that comes and goes like a ghost. She is old enough to help her mother gather kindling and sweep rushes, but young enough to still believe your concoctions might keep her safe. Every illness is a threat. Every cold is watched for signs of something worse. You know the symptoms: wheezing, blue lips, the rattle in the chest that no amount of garlic or honey can banish. You treat her as best you can, boiling herbs, coaxing her to drink bitter teas, wrapping her in all the warmth your meager possessions allow. You wash her hands more often than most, but the water is always dirty, and infection always waits. Your wife asks you, some nights, if you think the girl will live. You do not answer. There is no answer that will bring her comfort. Instead, you hold your wife's hand, her fingers gnarled and cold, and you both listen to your daughter's breathing in the dark. When it is calm, you almost hope. When it is rough, you both lie awake, counting the seconds between each gasp. Private life for a court physician is not a sanctuary but another ward, a place where you know too much and can do too little. You tend to your family with the same tired diligence you offer your patients, knowing that the odds are no better, perhaps worse. No lord's gold or noble favor can keep the rot and fever out of your home. Immunity is a myth, whispered by monks and peddlers who have not buried their own. On better days, you tell your daughter stories of places where the sun shines and the air is sweet, where the rivers run clear and no one ever coughs blood. She laughs at you, sharp and bright, and says she would rather have a new pair of shoes than a fairy tale. On worse days, she says nothing at all, and you pray to a God you have long stopped believing in for the strength to keep lying. Your wife manages the household with what little she has. She patches clothes from the rags of dead servants, barters for soap and candles, and sometimes brings you scraps of gossip from the kitchens. Who is sick? Who is stealing? Whose luck has finally run out? You rely on her more than you admit, and in rare moments of peace, You remember why you chose her, because she could laugh in the face of misery, and because she once believed you could change the world. You wonder, as you fall asleep, if your daughter will outlive you, or if her name will someday join the others in your private ledger. You wonder if your wife will one day lose her memory, as her mother did, and forget your name before death finds her. You wonder how many other private lives in the castle are just as lonely, just as brittle, just as shadowed by the knowledge that survival is mostly luck and a little stubbornness. The next morning, you wake to the sound of coughing and the scrape of a spoon in an empty bowl. Another day begins, the same as the last and the next, and you carry on, because that, more than hope, is what people do here. The castle provides many things: shelter from the wind, an endless supply of sick bodies, and a constant sense of someone else's suffering pressing in on all sides. But if you want anything truly useful, herbs that have not been gnawed by rats, a rumor that has not yet gone stale, or, on rare occasions, a taste of something approaching hope, you must go to the market. The market is not far, but the journey is always an ordeal. The road is little more than a muddy rut, rutted by wagon wheels and pitted by hoof prints. You wrap yourself tightly in your cloak, clutch your worn purse, and pick your way past the hedge that marks the edge of the Lord's domain. The smell hits you first: manure and rotting vegetables, wood smoke and sweat. You keep your eyes down, watching for loose stones, and more importantly, loose hands. The market square itself is a confusion of shouting vendors, quarrelsome chickens, and children who run wild, hair matted and faces sticky with the residue of yesterday's failed feast. Most sellers are villagers from the outlying farms, bringing whatever they have managed to grow or scavenge: turnips twisted into monstrous shapes, a handful of onions, leeks caked with mud, a string of limp fish, a small pile of apples half rotted and half stolen. Herbs are rare, but you seek them all the same. You scan the stalls for any flash of green: a scrap of mint, a bunch of nettles, the holy grail of real sage. Sometimes a bundle of dried yarrow or valerian appears, and you pounce before anyone else can snatch it away. You have learned to distrust anything that looks too healthy. The best herbs, like the best news, are usually hidden under something else: a tattered cloth, a pile of carrot tops, or a scowl from a vendor who would rather keep them for herself. You haggle, of course. Money is scarce, but bartering is an art. You trade old linen, honey, or a small vial of whatever concoction you have left over from last week's experiments. On a good day, you might come away with enough to restock your chest, enough to give the illusion for another week that you are a healer and not just a witness. The market is also where news travels fastest. Today, there is talk of pestilence in the next village over. Some say it is the plague, that dreaded word that hangs over every gathering like a vulture. Others insist it is only a fever brought by spoiled water or bad air. You listen to all of it, sifting gossip from truth with the practiced ear of someone who knows that both can kill. You hear that 3 children died in one house, their bodies blackened with bruises, tongues swollen, and eyes staring. A peddler claims to have seen a priest running from the church, robes flapping like a frightened crow, crying that the end is near. Another woman swears she saw rats streaming from the wells. With a cold certainty that any of these stories could be true or none of them. The talk spreads fear faster than disease ever could. People cross themselves, spit over their shoulders, and barter in whispers. You buy extra garlic, not because you think it will help, but because it is expected. You offer what advice you can. Boil your water, keep your children close, trust no strangers. It is not enough, and you know it. As you wander the stalls, you watch faces. Who is sick? Who is missing? Who is selling off the last of their possessions in a last desperate hope? You see the baker's wife, cheeks sunken and hands raw, arguing over the price of moldy grain. You see a boy you once treated for a broken arm, now limping, his face a map of old bruises. You see the old herb woman sitting in the shadow of her cart, watching you with her knowing eyes. You stop by her stall, examining the bundles of withered leaves she offers. She leans in close and whispers, "There is death on the wind, doctor." You nod, slipping her a coin and taking a handful of dried marjoram you know will do nothing but taste bitter. It is the ritual that matters. When your purse is empty and your hands full of half-rotten plants, you make your way back to the castle, boots heavier with mud and your heart heavier with what you have heard. You know that if the pestilence comes, there will be no stopping it, not with herbs, not with prayer, not with all the wisdom of all the doctors, from here to Rome. Back inside the walls, you store your finds, mark your ledger, and try not to think about the coming weeks. In the evening, you tell your wife what you have heard. She listens, silent and grim, and you both pretend not to see the shadow of fear in your daughter's eyes. There are no miracles in the market, only the slow, grinding business of barter and rumor and resignation, and the faint, desperate hope that, for now, you have brought back enough to last another day. The rumor reaches you before the official summons does. By the time the castle page appears, out of breath and red-faced, clutching a torn scrap of parchment, you already know what is coming. In a world where suffering is constant and answers are few, blame must fall somewhere, and today it has settled on the old woman who lives at the edge of the woods, the one villagers call a witch. The note is brief. Physician required at the hall. Witch to be tried. Bring your wisdom. You almost laugh at the absurdity of the last command, but the boy's earnest terror keeps you silent. Everyone fears the witch, but they fear the council's wrath much more. The great hall is packed, the air as tight and anxious as the crowd itself. Lords, ladies, servants, and even the odd passing monk have gathered for the spectacle. At the far end, your Lord presides, his swollen foot propped on a stool, his face set in a mask of righteous misery. To his left, the lady watches with narrowed eyes, her hands twisting a rosary. The chaplain mutters prayers. The steward hovers with the look of a man who enjoys the misfortune of others, and the guards stand at attention, trying not to yawn. The accused stands in the center, a small, bent woman in a ragged shawl. Her hair is white as milk, her face a map of every hard winter she has survived. Her hands tremble, but her gaze is steady. You have seen her before at the market, hawking bundles of dubious herbs, and sometimes on desperate nights, delivering babies in exchange for bread or a promise. The council begins with a litany of accusations, causing sickness, casting the evil eye, making milk curdle, and whispering curses on the harvest. Some claims are only half remembered stories. Someone's cousin's rash that refused to heal, a stillborn lamb, a fever that swept the village. The chaplain claims she was seen walking alone on a moonless night, and the cook insists that her appearance in the kitchen was always followed by spoiled broth. Your turn comes. The Lord's gaze pins you to your seat. As the court physician, what say you? Has this woman the power to sicken or heal by magic? The question is loaded, less a request for wisdom than for confirmation of a sentence already decided. You rise, feeling the weight of the crowd's expectation. Every face is hungry for an answer, whether it brings comfort or a scapegoat. You clear your throat, feigning authority. My lord, illness comes from many causes: bad air, foul water, spoiled food. The woman is known to use herbs, as do I. Sometimes they help, sometimes they harm. I have not seen proof of witchcraft, only the old practice of country medicine. A ripple of unease passes through the crowd. The chaplain presses, eager for certainty. Do you deny she brings evil? Have you not heard the stories? You reply carefully, knowing that too much doubt is as dangerous as too little. Stories are not proof. If I am to blame for every failed cure, then perhaps I am a witch as well. The court laughs, uneasy, but your lord is not amused. The woman herself remains silent. She does not beg, nor cry. Her eyes meet yours, and you see not gratitude, but understanding. She knows how this ends. A scapegoat is always needed, and her fate was sealed the moment she was named. The council deliberates. The steward suggests burning. The chaplain prefers confession and penance, and the lady quietly advocates banishment. Your opinion is requested again, this time more insistently. You say that isolation may be wise. Remove her from the village, limit her gatherings, and watch for any more miracles, good or ill. It is a compromise, and everyone recognizes it as such. The Lord grumbles, but he is tired. The chaplain blesses himself. The guards step forward to escort the old woman from the hall. their grips gentle but firm. She does not resist, nor does she look back. As the crowd disperses, you are left with a bitter taste. You have played your part, not as healer, but as judge, as apologist for ignorance, as the voice of reason in a room that wanted only reassurance. You know that nothing is solved. The next fever, the next failed crop, the next inexplicable death will bring the same spectacle, another witch, another trial, another illusion of control. You return to your chambers, exhausted by a role you never sought. On the way, you catch sight of your daughter in the corridor, watching with wide eyes. You wonder what stories she will believe, what wisdom you can possibly pass to her in a world that punishes knowledge as easily as it rewards superstition. You sit by your window, writing the day's events in your ledger. Another victim, another day. The machinery of blame grinds on, fueled by fear and hope in equal measure. And tomorrow, as always, you will go back to tending the sick, knowing full well that reason and mercy are the weakest medicines you possess. No one ever starves for long in the castle, at least, not the lords and their chosen company. The answer to every uncertainty is a feast. Whenever the Lord recovers enough to sit up, whenever the lady wants to prove her household's bounty, or whenever news, good or bad, comes from the king's court, the halls fill with roasting meat, coarse laughter, and the clatter of dull knives on trencher bread. Tonight is such an occasion. Some distant cousin has arrived, bearing rumors from the capital and a gift of salted herring. The tables are heavy with stew, birds of indeterminate origin, hunks of cheese furred with mold, and pitchers of wine so sour it could be used to pickle wounds. Candles gutter in smoky sconces. The air is thick with noise and smoke, and the faint, nervous excitement of those hoping for a reprieve from their daily misery. You are summoned not as guest, but as necessity. Before a single dish is set before your lord or his heir, you must taste it. The castle has never been free from whispers of poison, old rivalries, unpaid debts, and the simple malice of survival mean that suspicion is the only thing as plentiful as rats. You take your place at the Lord's left hand, eyes heavy, stomach uneasy, and hands trembling slightly from the cold draft that snakes through every crack. The first course is a bowl of pottage, thick with onions, root vegetables, and lumps of questionable meat. You take a spoonful, chew methodically, and wait. The company watches you with undisguised curiosity. Your lord barely conceals his boredom. You swallow, count to 100, and signal the all clear. Only then does the food circulate. It goes on. Roast bird, black bread, a pie that oozes with juice of something that was, until recently, alive. For each, you taste, you wait. You pretend that this ritual does any more than reassure the anxious and allow the guilty to see their work unfold. Some at the table seem disappointed each time you remain upright and unwrithing. It was a news. It is, you realize, the only entertainment left for those who have seen too many deaths to believe in old fashioned fun. Halfway through the meal, a commotion breaks out. The Lord's cousin, red faced and wheezing, collapses onto the rushes, clutching his belly. The room erupts in panic. Someone shouts for the chaplain, another for more wine. The lady covers her mouth. The cook is dragged in, hands still slick with grease, his face already twisted in fear. You kneel beside the cousin, whose breath is coming in short, ragged gasps. His lips are pale, his skin cold and slick. You ask what he ate last. His finger, shaking, points at the plate of salted herring, the very gift he brought. You examine the fish. The flesh is gray, the eyes cloudy, the smell sharp and wrong. Spoiled, no doubt, or worse, deliberately fouled. The Lord roars for answers. The steward blames the cook. The cook blames the merchant who sold him the herring. The guards blame the kitchen boys. The chaplain mutters prayers over the retching cousin. In the chaos, someone suggests that the witch, recently banished, must have cursed the fish from afar. You are asked, loudly and repeatedly, to identify the culprit. All eyes turn to you. Your experience as physician and taster now becomes the final court of appeal. You explain, in the driest tone you can muster, that the fish was not properly cured or kept, and that time and heat, not malice, are the most likely poisoners here. There is grumbling, but few are satisfied. Blame is a dish best served hot, and tonight it is everywhere. The cousin survives, barely, thanks to your quick mix of vinegar, honey, and forced vomiting. You are praised and scolded in the same breath. The Lord declares that henceforth only food grown within the castle walls will be served at his table. The cook, still trembling, is sent to scrub pots until sunrise. The kitchen boys are beaten as an example. As for you, you are left to clear the dishes, your palate numbed and your belly churning from too many mouthfuls of suspect stew and spoiled fish. You scrape plates into the trough for the pigs, knowing they will eat what no human should. Later that night, as the castle slumbers in uneasy quiet, you sit by your window, trying to steady your hands. You wonder how many poisons you have tasted over the years, how many deaths you have prevented by chance or luck, how many you have unwittingly allowed. There is no tally, no comfort, no lesson, only the certainty that in this place every meal is a gamble and every cure a kind of poison. In the morning, the cousin is still alive. The kitchen smells of burnt bread and fear. The Lord asks you, before breakfast, if the air feels heavier than usual, if you sense another poison. You assure him, as always, that everything will be well, even as you know that nothing ever truly is. As if disease, ignorance, and suspicion were not enough, the fates now send you a new torment, a rival. Rumor precedes him, as always, a learned man from the city, trained by monks, a master of potions and pulse taking. Whispers snake through the corridors before you ever see his face. Some call him a miracle worker, others a fraud. The cook says he once revived a drowned child. The steward claims he can cure gout with nothing but smoke and song. You meet him for the first time in the great hall, surrounded by courtiers eager for novelty and, perhaps, the spectacle of two doctors clashing over the business of suffering. He is young, or at least younger than you. His cloak is new, his shoes unscuffed, and his hands bear none of the scars that come from years of dealing with other people's filth and blood. He greets you in passable Latin and flawless arrogance. The Lord, swollen foot and all, beams with hope and thinly veiled impatience. Master Simon, he says, gesturing grandly, is here to advise, to observe, to assist. Two heads are better than one, are they not? The question is a trap. If you argue, you are proud. If you agree, you are weak. You choose the only path left, a gracious nod and a forced smile. Your rival's methods are strange, at least to your eye. He weighs the Lord's urine with tiny brass scales, squints at its color in the sunlight, and declares it full of ill humors. He prods the Lord's belly, counts his pulses in silence, and prescribes an exotic mixture of spices, honey, and a powder he guards jealously. He brings his own leeches, fat and glossy, and claims that only those from the southern marshes can truly balance the body's fluids. The court is enchanted. The lady asks after Master Simon's family in the city. The chaplain blesses his clever hands, and even the cook tries to curry favor, offering up the best cut of beef. The servants bring him wine, ask his opinion on rashes and coughs, and linger in the doorway to hear his opinions on matters medical and otherwise. You, meanwhile, are expected to assist, to fetch water, to note the changes in the Lord's swelling, to stand by with your own, now shabby, bag of remedies. Your rival is unfailingly polite in public, never missing a chance to praise your practical experience, always quick to explain, for the benefit of the assembled, why his methods are modern and proven in the best houses of learning. You grit your teeth and say nothing. In private, he is colder, his questions sharp-edged. How long have you served here? Do you still bleed your patients for fever? Have you ever seen a true epidemic, or just these petty rural fevers? You begin to doubt yourself, to question every decision, every treatment. The castle, once grudgingly your domain, feels smaller with each passing day. The council discusses importing more spices, more medicines, perhaps even a new set of scales like Master Simon's. The Lord grows impatient for results. The lady starts sending for your rival when your own remedies fail, her faith as fragile as bone. Then late one night, you are summoned to the Lord's chamber. The new physician is there, pacing, face drawn and hands trembling. The Lord's breath is shallow, his skin flushed and clammy. Master Simon's powders have done nothing but induce vomiting and chills. In desperation, he turns to you. What do you do for this? He asks, voice hushed so the council cannot hear. You look at the patient, the same swollen joints, the same purpled foot, the same stubborn illness that no medicine can truly cure. You reach for what you know: willow bark for the pain, cool cloths for the fever, quiet reassurance for the mind. Through the long hours until dawn, you watch over the Lord together. The rival's pride cracks a little. He listens as you explain which villagers have survived and which have not, which remedies have brought comfort, if not cure. You see, in his tired eyes, something almost like respect. The Lord recovers enough to groan for water. In the morning, Master Simon thanks you quietly, away from the ears of the hopeful and the desperate. The court, of course, remembers only his exotic powders and promises. You return to your duties, your place unchanged and unglamorous. For a time, the two of you work in uneasy tandem. He brings new ideas and rare ingredients. You bring patience, caution, and the accumulated knowledge of countless failures. The rivalry never disappears. Envy is the coin of the realm, but there are moments, late at night, when you share a drink and a story, and you both wonder aloud if the world will ever change. In the end, though, you remain the castle's physician, not because you are the best, but because you are there when the miracles run out and only hard-won endurance remains. There is nothing quite like the terror that descends on a castle at night. The ordinary sounds, snoring from the guard room, the restless clatter of horses in their stalls, the sigh of wind through chinks in the stone, become, in a moment, the prelude to panic. Tonight is no different. You are roused from a fitful sleep by urgent banging on your door, the kind that brooks no delay and promises only trouble. A servant, white-faced and breathless, stammers that you are needed at the gate. At once, please, sir, someone is dying, maybe dead already. You pull on your rough cloak, grab your pouch, and follow the servant into the darkness, heart pounding, not from hope, but from the dull certainty that whatever awaits you is not within your power to mend. The courtyard is a confusion of torchlight and shouts. The cold is biting, your breath clouds the air. You are led to the outer gate, where a crowd has gathered around a motionless figure sprawled on the frozen earth. Two guards keep the onlookers at bay, their faces grim. The gatekeeper, usually the most unflappable of men, looks close to retching. The body is that of a young man, unfamiliar to you. His clothes are ragged, the color of old dust and new blood. He has the pale, waxy skin of someone too long without food or warmth, but the blood trickling from his nose and mouth tells a different story. The captain of the guard tells you, in a low voice, that the man was found pounding on the gate only moments before he collapsed, crying for help in a tongue no one recognized. You kneel beside him. His chest rises and falls, barely. His eyes are wide open, staring at nothing, their whites tinged with yellow. You check for wounds, for signs of a fight or a fall. There are none, only the reek of sickness, something foul and sour beneath the mud and blood. What is it, doctor? Asks the captain, as if you can name the demons that haunt the night. You examine the tongue, swollen, flecked with black. The lips are cracked, the breath coming in ragged gasps, each one weaker than the last. You recognize the look. You have seen it before. Plague, perhaps, or poison, or one of the thousand unnamed illnesses that come and go with the wind. You shake your head. He will not last the hour, you say, and the crowd draws back a step. The guards look at each other as if death might leap from the body and seize them too. One woman crosses herself and mutters a prayer. Another spits on the ground, an old charm against contagion. You order the body moved, gently but quickly, into an outbuilding away from the castle's main halls. You instruct the guards to burn the man's clothes, to wash their hands with vinegar, if any can be spared, to touch nothing they do not have to. The orders are met with mutters of fear and reluctance, but they obey. You can almost feel their suspicion thickening. Who was this stranger? What evil did he carry? Is it here now among us? Inside, you do what little you can. A cloth for the dying man's brow, a sip of water he cannot swallow, a whispered word so good he cannot hear. He dies before midnight, his last breath a soft rattle in the cold. You are left with the body, the questions, and the gathering sense of doom. The captain demands answers. Was it the plague? Was it a curse? Should the castle be closed, the gates barred, the villagers warned? You answer as best you can. We will watch for fever. We will burn what must be burned. We will wait. There is nothing else to do. The body is buried by morning, outside the walls, with only a short prayer and hurried shovels for company. The guards speak in whispers about the man's origins, inventing stories to fill the silence. Some say he was a messenger, others a thief, others a spirit sent to test the castle's faith. Back in your quarters, you strip off your cloak and scrub your hands with vinegar, skin stinging. You wonder how long it will be before the first cough sounds from within these walls. How many days until the fever finds its way from the gate to the Lord's chamber, to the kitchens, to your own bed. In the following days, you watch and wait. Every sniffle is cause for alarm. The servants murmur about omens, about how death always comes at night. The chaplain offers extra prayers. The lady keeps her daughter close, while the Lord refuses to eat anything that has not been tasted first. You make your rounds with a forced calm, offering herbs, honey, reassurance, anything to stave off the rising panic. But in your heart, you know, the castle is not a fortress against death. At best, it is a sieve, slowing the flood for a moment, never stopping it for long. You add another line to your ledger, Stranger at the gate, cause uncertain, buried quickly. You sleep less, listen harder, and wait for the next knock on your door. In a place where death is so familiar, it rarely needs announcing. The church is both comfort and cage. Its bell marks every passage, births, deaths, marriages, even the rare occasion when a new cow survives the winter. It marks, too, the moments when the castle's faith is called upon to contain a rising tide of fear. And tonight, with the memory of the dying stranger still fresh, and rumors of plague swirling like crows over a battlefield, the church intervenes. You are summoned to the chapel before dawn by a nervous page who whispers that the chaplain requests your presence on a matter of spiritual health. You know what this means. When the body fails, the soul becomes everyone's concern. The chapel is cold, stone floors biting through your worn shoes, air thick with tallow smoke, and incense barely strong enough to mask the must of old wood. The chaplain greets you, eyes sunken, face drawn by too many sleepless nights and too much worry. He makes the sign of the cross before leading you to the front pew, where you sit side by side, priest and physician, two men used to speaking of hope with little to back it. My son, he begins, there is unrest. People are afraid. They look for answers, both from God and from those who treat their bodies. He does not need to say that some in the castle now look to you with suspicion, whispering that your herbs are foreign, your methods unholy, your very presence perhaps a cause of the misfortune that stalks their nights. He encourages you, gently but insistently, to confess, not for any specific crime, but for the general weight of your work. Your doubts, your failures, the times when your cures brought only pain, or when you hoped for a death that would quiet the suffering. You are surprised to find yourself grateful for the chance. Confession, even as ritual, offers a kind of relief you have not felt in months. You speak, haltingly at first, of your frustration and your powerlessness. The nights spent by sick beds, praying for fevers to break. The bitter taste of realizing your best was never enough. You admit that sometimes you hide your own fears behind rituals, bleeding, herbs, endless notes in your ledger, not because you believe in their magic, but because you know the people need to believe in something. You talk about the witch trial, about your guilt in watching the old woman cast out for nothing more than being old and unlucky. You confess your envy of the new physician, your anger at the court's shifting loyalties, your shame when your daughter asks questions you cannot answer. The chaplain listens, nodding, murmuring prayers for your soul. He tells you that doubt is the shadow of faith, that only the truly damned feel no remorse. He absolves you as much as a priest can absolve a man whose greatest sin is survival in a world stacked against the living. Then he offers his own confession that he too sometimes wishes for the quiet certainty of a world in which prayer always works, in which saints intercede and suffering has meaning. He admits to bribing the cook for better bread, to fearing for his own life when a cough rattles his chest, to closing his eyes and pretending to sleep when the wailing from the sick room becomes too much. You share a moment of tired, honest silence. Outside, the bell tolls for morning prayers, and servants begin their day with empty stomachs and heavy hearts. The castle feels smaller than ever. As you leave the chapel, the chaplain advises you to be seen in prayer, to show humility, to let the people see that you share their fears and hopes. Confession, he says, is not for God alone. It is a shield against suspicion. You follow his advice, attending Mass with the others, bowing your head, making the sign of the cross. Some in the pews eye you with less suspicion, some with more. You notice the rival physician standing in the back, silent and awkward, as if unsure which sins are his to confess. For a little while, the ritual works. Whispers soften. The lady brings you a fresh cloth for your hands. The cook shares a story about a neighbor who survived the fever. The Lord himself grumbles that perhaps you know what you are doing after all. But you know, everyone knows, that faith is as fragile as flesh, and both must be tended constantly. The next cough, the next unexplained death, will send the castle spiraling again, and you will be left, once more, to balance your remedies against the tide of superstition. That night, you sit by your window, hands folded, and whisper a prayer, not for miracles, but for the endurance to face another day. It comes not as a single storm, but as a slow, gray tide. For days there are rumors about the stranger at the gate, about dying animals in the fields, about a distant cough that never really leaves. Then, suddenly, it is everywhere. Servants collapse in the corridors, their faces flushed and their eyes wild. A stable boy is found shivering in the hay, delirious, with blood in his spit. By the end of the week, half the castle is sick. The council meets in panicked whispers, but the decisions change nothing. The gates are barred, the market is closed. The chaplain leads daily prayers, voice hoarse from overuse. The rival physician paces from room to room with his scales and his powders, but his face grows more gaunt each day, and his confidence, once so bright, is now dimmed by sweat and fear. You work ceaselessly, moving between sick rooms, your pouch of dried herbs growing lighter, your heart heavier. There are not enough clean linens. The air reeks of sweat, vomit, and the coppery tang of blood. You try everything: infusions of willow, pounded nettle, wine heated with garlic, cool cloths for fevers, honeyed water for the parched. For some, the remedies bring comfort. For most, they only delay the inevitable. The deaths come at all hours. In the morning, you find the kitchen girl cold and blue, her head resting on the hearthstones. By midday, the smith's wife breathes her last, her children already coughing in the next bed. At night, you wake to the sound of weeping and find the steward's son curled on the floor, dead before you reach him. You cannot keep up with your ledger. The pages blur together. So many names, so many causes. At first, you try to write each one: Agnes, fever and vomiting; Peter, black spots; old Joan, never woke. After the first 2 dozen, you simply note the number, a grim tally in the margins. There is no time for proper burial. The dead are wrapped in what cloth can be spared, carried outside at dusk, and placed in a pit hastily dug beyond the walls. The chaplain offers a blessing for each, his voice breaking, but there is no way to keep up. The living mutter prayers, spit for luck, and hurry away. The ground is hard, and the grave diggers, who are not grave diggers, but kitchen boys and gardeners, and anyone who can still stand, grow weaker each day. Inside the castle, despair settles like dust. The lady, pale and frantic, sits by her daughter's bed, holding a damp cloth to her brow. The Lord rages, refusing to eat, blaming the cook, the new physician, and then you. The chaplain prays until his voice cracks. The rival physician offers tinctures and tonics that seem to work only for those who would have recovered anyway. You meet in the hallway sometimes, both of you exhausted, sharing a look that says, there is nothing left to try. The people turn to superstition. Sprigs of herbs are hung above every door. Buckets of water are blessed and sprinkled in the corridors. The old stories surface that a witch's curse lies over the castle, that bad air drifts in from the marshes, that God is punishing everyone for the sins of the Lord. The cook refuses to enter the great hall, claiming the spirits of the dead gather there at night. Even the rats seem quieter, as if they too are waiting for the end. One evening, you find your wife shivering with fever, your daughter coughing blood into a rag. The knowledge that you, who have seen so much, can do so little for your own family is a new kind of torment. You make a poultice from everything you can find, force spoonfuls of broth past their lips, and sit beside them in the dark, waiting for death or reprieve. There are small mercies. A few recover: the captain of the guard, the baker's youngest, your rival physician's apprentice. You cling to these victories, tiny and rare. You hope, with each new sunrise, that the wave will break, that the sickness will tire and move on. Eventually, it does. The fever's slow. The dead are buried. The grave diggers, fewer now, fill the last pit and collapse beside it, spent. Those who survive emerge, blinking, into a world that is both emptier and heavier. You try to count the losses, but the numbers do not add up. Too many faces are gone. The castle is quieter now, haunted not just by ghosts, but by the echo of all the voices that will not return. In the end, you wash your hands, change your tunic, and write a single word in your ledger: epidemic. There is no room left for names. You are not sure what comes next, only that, for now, there is silence and a strange, aching gratitude for every cough, every groan, every living sound that remains. The castle is quieter now. The worst of the sickness has passed, and what is left is not peace, but a thin, uneasy stillness, as if everyone is afraid to breathe too deeply or hope too loudly. People walk softly, eyes darting from shadow to shadow, half expecting the plague to return for whatever it missed. The stench of death still lingers in corners, and the memory of loss clings like damp to the stone. It is during this lull that the chronicler comes to you, a thin, scholarly man with ink stained fingers and the habit of squinting at the world as if it is a book written in a language only he can decipher. He is not a priest, nor a noble, but something stranger, a man who collects stories, not souls or taxes. He has a quiet voice and a persistent cough that makes you nervous, though he assures you it is only the dust of old parchment. He sits across from you in your chambers, quill poised, and tells you he has been ordered by the Lord to record the facts of this recent affliction so that future generations may learn from our trials. You almost laugh. What wisdom could possibly be found here? But you are too tired for irony, and so you begin to answer his questions. He asks about the sickness. How did it start? Who fell first? What remedies did you try? You tell him what you know, though much of it is guesswork. The stranger at the gate, the first fever, the coughs that spread like wildfire through the servants' quarters. You list your treatments: herbs, poultices, willow bark, honeyed water, knowing that on paper it all looks hopelessly thin. He asks for numbers. How many died? How many survived? You flip through your battered ledger, reading names and causes, watching his hand race to keep up. When you pause, he prompts for details. How did the Lord behave? Did the rival physician help or hinder? Did the villagers obey your advice? Was there a scapegoat, a miracle, a moment when hope seemed real? He is interested in drama, but you have only monotony and despair to offer. He asks about your own family. Did you save them? You hesitate. He sees this and sets his quill down. The truth, he says, is important, not just for the record, but for the future. You nod and tell him. Your wife still coughs at night. Your daughter's strength is slow to return, and you are haunted by the faces of those you could not save. The chronicler listens, face unreadable, then scribbles a note so quickly you wonder if your words matter at all. He asks what you have learned, what should be remembered. This question lingers in the air, heavier than any before. You consider lying, offering some neat lesson about faith or resilience, or the wisdom of preparing for disaster. But you are too tired for stories. You tell him, write that we did what we could with what we had. Write that suffering was ordinary and kindness rare but real. Write that there were no miracles, only work and waiting. Write that people died for reasons no one understood and lived by luck as much as by cure. Write that most days, It was enough just to see another sunrise, even if that meant facing more misery. And write, if you must, that in the end, the plague passed, not because we were clever or good, but because it was time. The chronicler frowns, as if this is not the answer he hoped for. But what of hope? He asks. What of meaning? You look at your hands, stained with years of blood and ink and futile labor. Hope is a story we tell to keep going, you say, and meaning is what the survivors decide after the graves are full. He writes this down in silence. Then he closes his book, thanks you, and leaves you alone in the gray afternoon light. You wonder what his account will say. Will he write the truth, or will he turn the suffering into legend, heroes and villains, lessons and warnings, a neat ending for a mess that never had one? You suspect it hardly matters. History is as much about forgetting as remembering. That evening, you sit with your wife and daughter, sharing a loaf of stale bread, and watch the sky darken beyond your window. You wonder if any chronicler will remember your name, or if, in the end, you are just another faceless figure in a ledger, one line among thousands. But you know, with the dull certainty of habit, that tomorrow you will rise, fetch water, tend the sick, and keep living, if only because there is nothing else to do. The castle is quieter than it has ever been. In the long gray hours before dawn, you walk the corridors, footsteps echoing against the bare stones, the rushes worn thin by years of hurried feet and desperate errands. The air smells of dust and old smoke, of things ending rather than beginning. Outside, the world is still, no voices from the courtyard, no distant calls from the market, only the caw of a solitary crow somewhere beyond the walls. You feel old, not in years, though the aches in your bones argue otherwise, but in spirit. Each morning, rising from your narrow bed, you wonder how you manage to survive so many seasons of hunger, pestilence, suspicion, and loss. You know the castle as well as you know your own body, every damp patch of wall, every drafty corner, every stair that creaks at just the wrong moment. You are in many ways part of the building itself, worn, necessary, and always a little out of place. The duties do not cease. The Lord, thinner now, calls for you less often, and when he does, it is only to ask if you remember the names of all the dead. The lady sits by her window, embroidering with stiff fingers, her face a map of faded hopes. The council meets rarely, discussing only the most pressing needs: how to stretch the remaining stores, how to keep the peace among restless servants, how to keep fear at bay with routine and prayer. Your family lingers in the half light of survival. Your wife's cough is softer now, but it has never quite left her. Your daughter has grown quieter, older in spirit than her years, her laughter a rare sound that sometimes startles you into remembering what life was once meant to be. You keep them close, watching every shiver, every shadow under their eyes, your mind always reaching for remedies you no longer truly believe in. You visit the sick, fewer now, but always some. Children with bellies swollen from bad bread, old men shivering under patched blankets, maids with bruises they will not explain. You give them what comfort you can, a warm word, a bitter draught, the reassurance that someone still cares. Sometimes that is enough. Sometimes they look at you with a mixture of gratitude and dread, as if you are both a promise and a warning. In the evenings, you sit by your window with your ledger. The pages are nearly full, your handwriting cramped and hurried, each line a memorial to someone who was once part of this place. You read over the names, the causes, the little notes. Mother of four, fever, lasted 3 days. Stable boy, accident, bled too much. Newborn, no breath. Some entries are blurred where the ink ran, or where your hand shook. Sometimes you wonder if you are writing a history or simply keeping score in a game you can never win. You think about the lessons the chronicler wanted, the hope the chaplain preaches, the meaning everyone craves. In your quietest moments, you know the truth. Life here is a narrow bridge over darkness, held aloft by habit, by hunger, by the stubborn refusal to let go. You are not a hero, nor a villain, nor even, perhaps, a healer. You are simply present, witness and participant in the long, slow unfolding of misery and survival. Once you dreamed of more. You dreamed of cures, of knowledge, of a time when sickness would be understood and death tamed by science. Now you know that progress is a myth told to quiet the frightened, that every age believes itself on the edge of discovery, even as it sinks back into the same old shadows. But you do not despair, not truly. There is a dignity in routine, in doing what you can even when it is not enough. There is a kind of defiance in lighting a candle against the dark, in offering a cup of broth to the dying, in remembering names no one else will remember. If there is meaning, perhaps it is this: to keep going, to tend the living, to bear witness. One morning, you look out from the battlements as the sun rises, a weak, uncertain light on frost covered fields. You feel the weight of all you have seen, and yet you also feel the faint stirrings of relief. The world endures, and so do you. You close your ledger, tuck it beneath your arm, and begin your rounds. Somewhere in the castle, someone is coughing. Someone is hungry. Someone waits for a word of comfort, a remedy, a small kindness. You go to them, as you always have, not with hope of miracles, but with the simple certainty that even in the twilight of your profession, presence is its own kind of eternity.